What's the closest thing to a corn plot that you've ever experienced in real life? Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest videos. Once I was hiking with a friend of mine. We'd been out for about 2 weeks of backpacking and camping through the July sun. So as you can imagine, he and I were both sweaty, smelly, and bearded by the end of a particularly tough day. We were dead tired and decided to hike down the mountain along a road to go buy some more food in a nearby town. On the way down the mountain, we ran into a car pulled over on the side of the road, obviously experiencing some mechanical problems. The car was driven by two gorgeous college co-eds on their way to the beach or lake for the weekend, wearing bikini tops and Daisy Dukes as they pranced around their smoking vehicle trying to figure out what was wrong. As we drew closer, a police cruiser pulls over 25 yards behind them to help. The door opens and out steps not a grizzled old veteran detective or state trooper, but a 20-something lady cop who's just as hot as the two girls. I turn to my buddy and give him a look as if to say, "This is the most corno situation I'll ever be in my life. Don't mess this up for me." He looks at me right back in the eye and nods. We both know what we must do. We approach the trio of gorgeous women, now circled around the raised hood of the car, inspecting the smoking engine. We approach within hearing distance. The tension is palpable as we nervously call out, "Hey ladies, need a hand?" The lady cop turns to face us. She lowers her aviators to peer over the upper rim at the two hairy degenerates before her, and tells us that she has the situation under control and that we shouldn't be walking along the shoulder of a state highway. We hightail it out of there, our dreams of an epic 5-score crushed. We get ice cream instead, and that sort of makes up for it. Story 2. Back when I was 20, I worked as a pizza delivery man for the cash, and the pizza, every so often the cool manager would let us make our own at the end of our shift, starving college students and all that. Anyway, I was out delivering pizzas near the beginning of the school year in the hot, humid Texas weather. My last run of the evening took me to this apartment complex. I headed up the stairs and noticed they had the windows open and fans running. The AC was out in the apartment building. I knocked on the door and there was this hot co-ed standing there, wearing a man's t-shirt. Now, it was a really friggin' warm night. She had her hair up in a messy bun, but there was that one strand out of place. She had a slight sheen of sweat on her arms and legs. She had a hungry look in her eyes. I pulled the pizza out of the padded warming sleeve and she paid me in cash. "Sorry," she said, "I don't have any cash for the tip." She set the box down and looked me over, "But I think I've got something you'd like," so she handed me a can of beer. Story 3. I went to a show 1 year down in Jersey and stayed at this pretty garbage hotel. We went out to the parking lot and heard a knocking on the glass behind me. There was a beautiful Spanish girl, all bare in the window doing a slow dance for me. She gave me the "come here" look and I almost exploded right there. It took everything for me not to go in there since I was engaged. Story 4. A few years back, I had gotten out of a pretty rough relationship. I went up to Montreal to see a friend before I lived there and meet up with him at a bar where he was working. It was a week before Christmas, and the plan was to get shit-faced for a week and then go back home. So, I met up with him while he was working, and he introduced me to a couple of people who were at the bar. After chatting with this cute tattooed girl sitting next to me, let's call her Marie, she convinced me to drive her home for her safety. Naive me said, "Sure, why not? I'm a gentleman, I don't want anything happening to you." We got in my truck, and at a red light, she put her hand on my leg, said she wanted to repay my kindness, and leaned in. One thing led to another, and she gave me a blowy. We got to her place, and I awkwardly thanked her, but she told me we were not done and told me to park, which I did. She took me to her apartment, and very loud banging ensued in her living room and bedroom. After a while, we heard banging on the bedroom door, and someone yelled, "Marie, if you're going to be that loud, you might as well just friggin' invite me to join you." So, she neglected to tell me she had a roommate, and apparently did not care. I thought we were done when she got up and went to the door. Nope. She opened the door, grabbed her roommate, kissed her, and threw her on the bed. My first 3 score happened. I was nervous. It might have been the bottle of rum we were drinking directly from too, so I just could not do it. After a while, Marie said, "Okay, sweetie, this is taking too long, we're both dead, just put it through the back door." So, my first experience in that field too. Thus began my descent into depravity in Montreal. The next day, I told my story to my friend, who said not really surprised. The girls in that apartment always go to extreme events. They're also part of the art model scene. They're all pretty messed up people, and then high-fived me. It was a good night. Story 5 years ago, one of my friends had a mom that still is ridiculously hot. I'm talking about 10 out of 10 total stereotypes. We always gave him hard time for it. She was in her late 30s at the time, maybe 40, but looked as if she were in her late 20s. As we all got older, she became a little bit flirtier with us friends. Nothing too forward or inappropriate, but she was divorced, and you could tell she liked pretending, as though she was still in her more youthful years. One day, however, she started being way more forward with me. One Saturday afternoon, my parents went out of town for the day. I was at home by myself, bored, and decided to smoke because why not? Unbeknownst to me, my friend's mom had talked to my mom earlier that day and had to swing by our house to pick something up. While I was smoking, I heard the doorbell ring. Thinking it was just a FedEx package or something, I peered down the hall and saw my buddy's mom through the window. My heart raced as I disposed of the cigarette and nervously went to the door. She greeted me cheerfully as she always does and explained why she was there. I led her inside, and after a few moments, she remarked, smells like cigarettes in here, with a sly smile. I tried to play it off, mentioning that my parents smoke, so, that explains the smell. You can't fool me. Do you smoke? She asked. She had a playful smile on her face, so it wasn't stern, but I was still hesitant to admit anything. I stammered through my words when she laughed and said, "Oh, come on, you can tell me. I can keep secrets." So, I admitted it and made her swear not to tell my parents, to which she agreed. So, this is where everything kind of got set in motion. She hung around for a few minutes and shared a cigarette with me as we made small talk. She said she was used to having to hide her smoking from her ex-husband, so she understood my reluctance to tell her. Before she left, she mentioned how we could sneak a cigarette together sometime. Over the next couple of years, we'd smoke together whenever I was at my buddy's house. Never really became an actual smoker per se, but I used it as an opportunity to get some one-on-one time with an incredibly hot woman. Then another weekend, my parents were out of town, and I was sitting at home again. At some point, I realized I forgot to hand in a part of my history paper the previous Friday. My work cited Scorson's page, and began to panic. I called my teacher, who explained that if I could get it to his mailbox at the school that day, everything would be fine, but if I couldn't get it to him by Monday, I'd have deducted points. Seeing as how my car was in the shop and my parents were out of town, I called my friend. He didn't answer his cell phone, so I called his house phone. He only lived a few minutes away, so it was my best bet. His mom answered instead. I explained the situation to her, and she told me he was also out of town visiting his grandparents for the weekend. She offered to pick me up and give me a ride instead, so of course I accepted. She pulled up to our front driveway a few minutes later. I hopped in the passenger's seat, and we were on our way. I thanked her for giving me a ride, etc. She teased, "Well, now you owe me a favor, so I'm going to hold you to it." I laughed and agreed to repay her. After I dropped off the missing part of my paper, she mentioned she had some errands to run and asked if I'd accompany her, which I gladly agreed with. We ran by the post office and grocery store. On the way back, we stopped at a traffic light when she noticed one of her girlfriends in the lane next to us. They rolled down the windows to say hi, and her friend asked who the handsome young man was. She joked that I was her new boyfriend. We all laughed and continued our way. As we approached her house, she brought up the favor I owed her. She had a lot of money from her previous marriage and lived in a big house with a big yard and all that good stuff. She mentioned she had some heavy flower pots and stuff to put in the storage shed in her backyard and asked if I'd help. Completely oblivious, seriously, never in a million years did I imagine this would happen. I was obliged. We get to her house, I help move some stuff to her storage shed, and figure it's about time to head home. She thanked me, but before I could say anything, she asked if I wanted to smoke a cigarette with her. I shrugged and accepted. She walked up the back porch that led to a downstairs bedroom. She opened the door to walk inside and get her cigarettes. She came back out a moment later, offered me one, and we lit up. A few moments later, she said, "Oh, you haven't seen the remodeling I'm doing for this room, have you?" Of course I didn't. She said, "Come in here really quickly. I'll show you some pictures." I knew she didn't usually smoke in the house, so I hesitated and moved to put out the cigarette. But she motioned for me to come in regardless and said, "No, it's fine." She pulled out some photos of work these people she hired had apparently done at other houses. I didn't know anything about interior decorating and honestly couldn't care less, but I feigned interest. And that's when things took a turn. She stubbed out her cigarette and said she was going to grab a Diet Coke and asked if I wanted one. She came back and said she had some other photos of the room she wanted to show me, to see what I thought. As she opened the drawer to pull out more photos and began flipping through them, suddenly, bam, a photo of her in a suggestive position in the same room we were standing in. I was completely speechless and instantly got a stiffy. "Oh, that's not supposed to be there." She wore a sly smile. Bam, another picture and another. She sarcastically said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I managed to mutter, "Oh my God," before she said, "Well, do you like them?" "Of course. I frigging like them." She asked if I'd like to keep any of them. I managed to say something like, it would just be great. I had no idea what I was trying to say, but she finished my sentence for me anyway. "If we banged?" She immediately finished, staring right at me with that sly smile. "What? Then she pulled me in for a kiss. All thinking went out the window and I embraced her. She said, "You know I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to do this for the longest time." I replied, "Oh, you have no idea. We did it for a good 45 minutes or so. I was determined to make it last as long as possible, since I didn't know if I'd ever get to do it again. Turned out I did, since no one else was in the house." She was very audible. To this day, it is the best I ever had. She drove me home a little while later and teased that we'd have to do it again sometime. We did end up doing it again, but it was a couple years later, when I came home for a couple weeks from college. Story 6, so a few years back. In my mid-20s, the place I was renting was owned by an elderly Asian couple. They had this holiday party at their place one time, and I met a friend of theirs. She was an Asian woman in her late 40s, early 50s, but still very fit and attractive. She was married to some white guy, who was clearly in his late 70s and obviously not doing great health-wise. Dude was barely walking at a decent pace. So, we're just making small talk, and she mentions she needs some help with organizing some data on the computer since she wasn't very computer savvy. The owners must have told her I was good with computers. So, she ends up asking for my number to talk about the project later. A few days go by. She calls and tells me about what she wants to have done. I told her that it sounds fine and to just send me the files so I could work on it for her in my spare time, then email them back. She makes some excuse about me having to come over to her house to do the work. Whatever. So I end up going over a couple days later. She answers the door and dressed revealingly, white halter top, short jeans and high-heeled sandals, on a day that was kinda cold. She was very touchy-feely in her greeting. Casually, she drops the hints that her husband isn't home now and shows me to the office. She points out the files and data she wants organized, so I start to work on it. Not long after, she comes in and asks me if she could get me anything to make me more comfortable. Again, all smiles and touchy-feely. Thinking back now, I realize this is like a pretty solid fantasy scenario. And fantasy-wise, I would have normally been all over it. But the stupid thing is, living in the scenario felt very awkward, weird, and kinda creepy. I knew what she wanted, it just felt odd and super wrong. I just quickly finished the work and left, even with her saying stuff like she had to pay me somehow as I was leaving. I don't know. Maybe it was because I had met her husband and shook hands with him. Maybe because I knew she was friends with my landlords. I just couldn't do it. Story 7. I was a pizza guy for 3 years. Delivered to this one cute girl, anyhow, handed her the pizza, had her sign, and while she did, she poked her booty out quite nicely. Then she had my attention. But typical me didn't make any conversation. She handed me back the receipt and asked if I had Facebook. I said no, but I can give you my phone number minutes. After I got in my car, she texted me talking about dirty stuff. So when I got off my shift, I came back over and it happened. It didn't happen on the spot, but I came back and got the job done shortly after. It counts, right? Story 8. I installed cable for Time Warner. First job of the day is swapping a cable box for this cute woman. She's just in her robe and giving me the eye the whole time I'm there. She gets a call from some guy and they're arguing. I can tell if it's an ex or something. She hangs up and apologizes for getting into it with him. She tells me he's white, I'm a shy little white guy, and that she loves white boys. I'm all finished and wrap up with my usual. Is there anything else I can do for you? She motions to me to come over, and we omitted explicit content. We look at each other like we can't believe that just happened. I zip up, and she tells me she's 43 and has a son about my age. She looked like she was 25, and I was in total shock. It made me feel weird, so I left without getting her number. Story 9. I went to a friend's wedding in another country. As I arranged to go at the last minute, I could not find a hotel room for the night. My friend's divorced mother offered that I stay at her house. I had only seen her mother a couple of times before, but accepted to stay over. After everyone left their hotel rooms, her mom and I were alone. A few drinks later, we ended up spending time together in her bedroom. Best 3-day weekend away in a long time. Story 10. I'm a chef in a fine dining restaurant in a casino. The kitchen is completely open with a bar going around the front. So we get people sitting at the bar talking with us while we cook. It happens often that we get lonely cougars that will sit there and drink and flirt all night with me, or the sous chef eventually trying to get one of us to go back to their room with them when we're off. I've never done it because I'm married, but there have been a few that I would have loved to have spent the night with, but end up running straight home and jumping my wife after getting worked up from the flirting. Story 11. As a mover, I have done it with multiple women that I have moved, including multiple times on the job. I own and operate my own small moving company, meaning I do all the estimates, take all the calls, do the jobs with employees, of course, handle payroll, etc. The business started when I was 30, 8 years ago, and is in really good shape. Most of the clients we service are women between 25 and 35 years old living in the city. There are 3 instances that apply to this post that I can think of right now. The first would be a girl I moved once, and then she called me again to come give an estimate because she was moving again. Very common activity. Sometimes I do 2 or 3 home visits per day. I show up, and she is wearing the tightest jeans she owns, is baking banana bread, and has a 6-pack of PBR on the counter. She offers me a beer, which I refuse because I'm a professional. After speaking for a bit about the move and looking online for some solutions to her problems, my next estimate cancels via text, and she offers me another beer. This time I say yes, because my schedule is free, so no worries. We end up drinking a couple of beers. She is pretty much sitting near me, constantly squeezing my arms, and wants to see my tattoos. I can see where this is headed, and I'm fine with it. We end up making out, and end up doing it on the couch. Another beer, more banging, and we head out for sushi. I ended up staying over and doing it all night, then took off the next morning when she went to work. We dated for a bit, but she was a little crazy. Next item up for bid. I was doing a move into a luxury high-rise for another repeat client. We were getting the truck loaded up and were about to head out to deliver when I realized I had left my hoodie in the apartment. I left my guy in the truck, took the elevator up, and knocked on the door. I should mention that when I'm working, I'm all business. You could flirt with me, and all I can think about is sticking to the estimate and which piece of furniture needs to come out next. It is like autopilot, where my conversation is broken every day. If the job moves smoothly, I'm in my own world. I say this because I assumed this girl was interested in me, and I did not notice. I'm not sure what was going on when I knocked, but she was worked up when she answered the door. I thought nothing of it and retrieved my sweatshirt. Then she started asking about my tattoos and squeezing my arm. Sound familiar? No, I do not want a beer. I have to drive the truck, thank you. She started talking about my need to relax, and a calm just came over me, like an out-of-body experience. My head was like a balloon floating above me. She was gonna help me relax. Okay, now she was up close to me, and my heart was racing. Then she gave me a blowy. I told my employee the elevator got stuck. The girl never made it weird for the rest of the job. I went to her new place multiple times after that for drunken late-night bangings. Nice girl, good person. The third example is like the second another guy, and I were moving a woman into her new place. The ex-husband showed up. I knew there was a bad history there from bits of conversation I picked up from her phone calls, and from people stopping by to wish her well at the loading point. I told her the guy was down at the truck asking questions, who I was, how I knew her, and so on. I told him straight, I'm the mover. I'm not putting up with this crap. You should not be here. He was never seen around again that day. Relaying this to her, she panicked. I told her to calm down. He was gone, and she should call the police if this guy was a problem. Now here we go with the arm squeezing. Then she was hugging me, trembling. I put my arms around her to comfort her and told her she was safe. She nestled her head into my neck and started kissing. Oh boy, we started to kiss, but the guy I was working with was in and out of the apartment. I told him to leave the boxes at the top of the stairs and I would bring them into the apartment. The woman and I embraced again and moved into the back bedroom. I could hear my employee going up and down the stairs. The boxes were piling up. Crap, I needed to get back to work. After I was done, I started hustling boxes inside. It was a 90-degree day. I was already dehydrated and now I was about to pass out from what had just happened. It was so noticeable that the other mover told me I should take a break because I looked pale. I never met with that woman again. She emailed me wanting me to contact a police detective to give a statement about the ex being there. I was all set with that. I hope everyone enjoyed listening. Those days are over. I am engaged and have a beautiful 8-month-old daughter who is waking up from her nap. Time to be a daddy. Story 12. In college, I go home for the summer and live with my parents while working a summer job. I run out of checks one day and walk into a local branch of my national bank to order more. I'm pointed into an office where a girl just a little older than I am is sitting behind a desk. She sees me and smiles. While ordering the checks, we get small talk and I find out she's new to the area and has just graduated. The bank job is her first right out of school. We begin to flirt a bit, and I notice how damn good she looks in a blazer. Finally, she asks for my address to put on the check headers, and I give her my home address. She freezes, smiles, and then tells me she just moved in down the street from me. We laugh about it, and I tell her a few things about my lifelong neighbors. It was almost 5, and she told me that if I wanted to wait around, she was going to grab a beer after work. I did. We banged in the bank parking lot less than 20 minutes later, and then almost every night for the rest of the summer. Story 13. I was moving to a new apartment after a breakup, so I had all my stuff as well as my ex's stuff, because he had taken off to go find himself in Bali, leaving me to handle all these arrangements. Emotionally vulnerable is too mild of a term to describe me on that day. Anyway, I hired a moving company that was kind of a hot mess. They told me they had insurance, then said it expired, showed up an hour late, etc., but they were 2 nice guys who worked quickly. They also happened to be super hot, so we got to my new apartment and they're moving stuff in. I left briefly to go pick up pizza for all of us to eat once they were done. When I got back, the owner and hotter of the two told me very apologetically that they had forgotten my bed frame at the old apartment. Oh no, but he said he'd go back and pick it up and drop it off later that evening, after their next moving job if it was alright with me. He texts me when he's heading back with the bed frame and mild flirting ensues. He drops it off and stands awkwardly at the door. I ask if he wants a drink. We both get hammered on Red Bull and raspberry vodka. Don't judge, I had just moved and did it on my couch. Story 14. I was living in an off-campus rental area during part of college. The landlord hired a local painting and decorating business to install new window blinds. The girl who came to put them up was cute, friendly, and flirted while standing on the ladder, with me sitting on the edge of the bed, watching and making small talk. I was there by myself. At one point, she put the drill and screwdriver down, and the small talk became no talk. But unlike a corn scenario, we dated for a few months afterward. Story 15. I was a pizza delivery guy many years ago. I had a delivery just outside our delivery zone, but did it anyway. The address turned out to be a super sketchy motel off the highway. I knocked on the hotel room door and a very haggard-looking West worker answered the door. $24.50, I said. We don't have any money, she said. Behind her was a second one lying on the bed, just as old and haggard-looking as the one in the doorway. She said I could get my payment another way with them in exchange for the pizza. I immediately turned around, got back in the car, and was off on my next adventure. Story 16. One of our managers asked me to stop by his house and look at his computer, so I did, knowing full well his wife did amateur corn. Well, she answered the door in a bathrobe and I proceeded to say, I'm here to fix the computer. To which she replied, it's in the back, it can't get online for some reason. Turned out to be a DNS problem, so I changed it to the default Google servers and that fixed the issue. Then I left. Story 17. This one time me and a couple buddies were sitting around my little one-bedroom apartment smoking out and playing Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine on the old-school Sega when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find this cute little blonde asking if she could use my phone because her car had broken down just up the street. This was in 1996, prior to cell phones being as prevalent as they are now. I am of course obliged. She came in and picked up the phone and appeared to be making a phone call, but claimed nobody answered. She then asked me if I could show her around my apartment. It was a small one-bedroom, one-bath place, so naturally I showed her the kitchen, living room, bathroom, and my one-bedroom. She immediately shut the bedroom door, locked it, and then took her top off. After performing my civic duty, she proceeded to tell me that her sister had just lived up the road and she saw me while visiting her sis the other day, and the whole car had broken down. It was a ruse. She left, and I never saw her again. However, a few days later, I found her innerwear that she must have left as a prize for me stuffed inside of my pillowcase. Story 18. I was a newspaper delivery driver, rolling around, throwing papers, drinking coffee, and smoking cigarettes. It sucked. The only time someone was out there to talk to me was to yell at me about some sort of BS, like why the paper was not perfectly on the mat, or because they were old and sad. So, when someone came down the driveway after I tossed a paper, I do not know why I backed up. But I did. It was a pretty guy instead of the old fart I was expecting. Pretty good so far. He asked me to go pick him up some cigarettes since he was too drunk to drive. He handed me a $50 or $100 bill and I rolled off. But I did come back. He tried to tip me and then offered me a drink. What the hell? I had time to kill, and it was the middle of the night. Well, walking up to the garage was the most gorgeous woman I had ever seen. She looked like a goddess. He was over 6'2" and furry as hell. Exactly my types. We had a beer and a shot and got to talking about corn. I asked if they swung. Nope. Oh well. I had to finish my route and they were thinking, I hope. We exchanged numbers so I could drive back out there after I finished. Less than 15 minutes later, I got the call. Want to have a 3 score? Hell yes, I booked it back after finishing my route in record time. We drank more and we did it. Everything you could imagine at one point. I think I even said, I feel like I'm in a corno. Also, I sucked. No idea why. I had done it before, but meh, my game was off. They were amazing. I never heard from them again. But I did run into her at a mall later. I did not recognize her, and we exchanged some awkward hellos. 11 out of 10 would do again. Story 19. 8 years ago, my now ex-girlfriend and some of our friends are at Denny's playing apples to apples. It was college, whatever. My girlfriend and I got a little excited as the night wears on. Her friend suddenly pipes up, "Can I go home with you two tonight?" It was so out of the blue and unexpected that we both just looked at each other before anyone can say anything. My bud, the perfect wingman BT Dewey, pipes up with, "Dude, when someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes." Story 20. This is probably the closest that I got years ago. I was a cashier at a grocery store. There were a few hotels right next door, and the store was right off the highway, so we got a lot of travelers and the occasional celebrity. One evening, a group of 4 gorgeous women in their early 20s came through my line. They looked like typical hot college chicks. I was 18 and somewhat of a late bloomer. So while I had gone through puberty, I was far from a man. I was skinny and young-looking, far from the type of guy I would expect these girls to associate with. Their entire order consisted of a few bottles of wine and Boone's Farm, an abnormally large cucumber, a pack of fresh strawberries, 2 cans of whipped cream, and some protections. I said something like, "Looks like you girls are in for a fun evening. Can I come?" I was just talking crap. I had no expectations. I was just trying to be funny. Without missing a beat, one of the girls said, "If you're going with us, we'd insist on it." In response to my "Can I come?" I laughed and they laughed. They paid, and right before they walked away, one of the other girls said, "Seriously, if you want to hang out, we are next door in room 232. You should come over when you get off." I did not even get a chance to respond. They just walked away, and I stood there in awe. They very well may have been pranking me and sending me to another room, but I dedicated more than a few solo sessions to imagining what would happen with those 4 girls that night. I had a girlfriend at the time, so I passed on the opportunity, but I would be lying if I said it was not a difficult decision. Story 21, I swear, totally true story. This happened a few months ago. Backstory, my best friend Sasha and my boyfriend at the time. Brad used to hook up before I ever met either of them. They ended things when things started getting complicated and miraculously were able to stay close friends. Then I entered the picture, started dating Brad, and Sasha and I hit it off well. So we became a little trio of best friends. The 3 of us hang out all the time, very comfortable with each other, etc. Also good to note that all 3 of us are very comfortable being bare, in general. We had spent a Saturday at the pool with a bunch of our friends drinking and having fun. Mother Nature decided to ruin the fun by pouring rain later that afternoon, so we quickly cleaned up our coolers and food, then headed back up to Brad's apartment to dry off. Everyone else bails to go home and nap, so it's just Brad, Sasha, and me left. Sasha was cold and wet and a little buzzed, so she ran into Brad's bedroom all bare to snuggle under the covers. I think this is a great idea, because I too am cold and wet, so I do the same. You can immediately see the excitement on Brad's face. He goes into the bathroom, and Sasha and I start laughing at the fact that he's getting so worked up over something that she and I had no intention of doing it. Then Brad comes out and drunkenly flops onto the bed with us. For a while we just talk, then the topic turns intimate, and you can feel the tension start to build among the 3 of us. He leans over and starts making out with me. Then I turn to Sasha and do the same. He looks at Sasha, then looks back at me. I nod, so then he and Sasha start making out as well. It was very clear what was about to happen, so being responsible adults, we paused for a second. So we quickly set our ground rules, got explicit consent from each person, and established a plan to end it all if anyone felt uncomfortable at any point. Once we had it all settled, we resumed. It was my first first time with a girl, and honestly one of the best, most exciting experiences of my life. It was a scene out of a movie, and I loved it. For the record, all three of us are still great friends too, so yay for no post-3 complications. Story 22. Not sure if this counts, but I was at a club called Rich in Houston, and one of the girls that walked around and thanked you for coming came up behind me and tapped my shoulder. When I turned around, she appeared to be rolling or something, but wasn't sober. Anyways, the first words to come out of her mouth were, "Will you do it with me?" At first, I stood there thinking she was joking, but she stood there not saying anything. So I said, yeah, we went into the men's restroom and did it. It all happened so fast that I couldn't believe it. After we were done, I just figured something had to be up. Because that doesn't just happen. So I went and found my brother and my friend and got the hell out of there just in case. Story 23. Ex-pizza delivery guy here when I was 19. I delivered for a local pizza joint. I usually picked up day shifts when no one else wanted them. Once a month or so, I would deliver to this gay nightclub around lunch when they would have meetings, owner and other staff members just hanging out in the office. I would get buzzed in the side door. The owner was friendly and usually gave me a generous tip. He'd chat me up for a few minutes before I'd leave, occasionally giving me a pat on the back on my way out. This continued for a few months with nothing out of the ordinary happening until one afternoon he offered me a shot from the bar. It's 1 p.m., I'm a 19-year-old stoner type and didn't really have many craps to give, so I said sure, why the hell not. Took the shot, chatted a little longer, and he sent me on my way. As I was leaving, he asked if I would be working tomorrow afternoon and if I was. At the time, I didn't even stop to think that this guy might be flirting with me. Fast forward to the following day, and I get a delivery to the club, though this time there's a delivery note saying come to the back door. I enter the back and see that it's the pool and hot tub room of the club and quickly realize that this is not their typical meeting. The owner and 5 or 6 guys are hanging in the hot tub, having a few drinks. The owner hops out of the tub, wearing an extremely tight speed. As I'm walking in, and all I see is a moose knuckle of a bulge bouncing up towards me. I set down the pizza and got the bill ready. He handed me 50 and said, "Keep the change. Hey, why don't you grab a drink and hang out with me and the boys for a while? The hot tub is nice and warm." All the while he's got his hand on my shoulder. I managed to stutter out something about deliveries and quickly excuse myself, bolting out the door. Story 24. It didn't happen to me, but a friend of mine had one. He wasn't a ladies' man by any means. He only had one long-term girlfriend who turned out to be a cheater, and then he swore off women. He lived alone in his apartment, and next door were a bunch of Ukrainian girls who were lifeguarding for the summer. I think at one point, one of them popped in and asked if they could borrow his vacuum cleaner. But aside from polite nods in the hallways, that was about the extent of their interaction. One night, he noticed they were moving out. He said he heard a bit of arguing in the parking lot, and he saw the other girls get into a van together and leave. There was just this one blonde lifeguard sitting on the curb alone again. He's no ladies' man, so I believe him when he says he went down and asked her if she wanted to use his phone or come inside purely out of concern. Anyway, she came in and he ended up shooting her in the poop chute. Story 25. It happened to me about 4 months ago. It happened while I was working at a wedding venue, which I cannot name since I still work there, and only a few selected people know. Anyway, to the good stuff, I was working behind the bar at the venue and had been serving this one girl, a bridesmaid in particular. We had been flirting a little whenever she came up to the bar to grab a drink. After about the 3rd time, I asked for her number, and she gave it to me. Anyway, the night carried on, and at that point, some of the texts she was sending me were absolute filth. I was sitting behind the bar thinking I needed to finish as soon as possible so I could go bang this woman. Unfortunately, I could not get off work early, and she went to bed. I thought all hope was lost when she texted me, saying, "I need some room service." Just as I had finished, I walked up to the room, knocked, and called out, "Room service." There she was in all her glory. She grabbed me, pulled me into the room, and we did it. Afterward, we had a little chat, and eventually fell asleep. I then had to wake up in the wedding venue where I worked, and sneak out before the manager arrived. 10 out of 10 night. Story 26. Pulled over by ultra-hot police officer for speeding. Had a fun chat, lots of flirting. Give him my number as I was newly single, and feeling adventurous, and knew he wouldn't because he was trying to remain at least a little professional. A few days later, experienced my first real Netflix and chill session. 20 out of 10 would bang ridiculously attractive state trooper again. I need to give him a call if anyone is curious, no ticket. Story 27. I'm in pest control, and I service a chain of drugstores in my city. Anywho, one of these drugstores has a separate storeroom that a supervisor must unlock for me. Now this supervisor had been bugging me for my number Facebook for a while, and I had been successfully dodging her advances, because she's not really my type. Eventually, I gave her my number, kinda just to get her off my back. I immediately started getting explicit pictures and such, and I reciprocated, because I don't know, I was all excited I guess. So one day we're in the back room. and she sat me down and gave me a pretty solid blowy. Now it's twice a month on a regular basis, and I can't seem to stop myself, even though it's risky, because the pharmacy has keys to the room as well. Story 28. I worked for Jimmy John's back in college, delivering sandwiches. I got an order for Amanda at the ZTA sorority house. Most of them were outside tanning in bikinis. I asked one girl if she could get Amanda because I had her sandwich. She looked at me and said, "Which one?" I ended up calling her and heard a phone start ringing. I walked over as she answered hello. I told her it was going to be $6.25. She pulled a $20 bill out of her top slightly and said, "I want you to pull it out with your teeth." I looked at her with a "yeah, right" face. She said, "Get it, and you can keep the rest as your tip." I bent over with skepticism, buried my face in her cleavage for what felt like an hour, but was 2 seconds. I bit the $20 bill, pulled it out, smiled, and said thank you. Story 29. Last week I stayed in South Carolina. When I went to check in, the room I was supposed to stay in wasn't ready yet, so they asked if they could put me in a different room, and I said for sure. I got to my room and decided to take a shower. When I got out, I put on my bra and underwear, but decided to leave it at that for the time being since I was alone. The maintenance guy then used his key card to open the door. I screamed, and he quickly shut the door, saying, "Sorry." I quickly put on a t-shirt and sweats, and went out to investigate, and he was waiting at the door. Apparently, a light broke in my room, and he told the front desk not to rent out the room before he could fix it, because of the exposed wiring. He put the cover over it and said he'd be back later, but he'd knock first to see if I was there. Walking around in my underwear, suddenly maintenance guy appears. Story 30. So, my 40th birthday was approaching, and my wife asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I jokingly said a 3 score. She ended up asking one of our good friends, female, if she would participate with me for my birthday. She said yes. So on my birthday, I was presented with said friend while my wife took pictures. Fast forward 2 years, she lives with us now, and I get to do it with both of them whenever I want. My life is dope. Story 31. Buying a new TV at Best Buy, and the cute checkout girl asked if it was for her. I said no, but told her she was welcome to watch it at my place later. Flirted a bit while my check was being declined. Had made a big purchase the day before, but money was still there. Paid with debit card instead, and got her phone number on the declined check. My roommate, who witnessed the whole thing, just laughed at himself through most of it. Called her after her shift. She came over to watch movies with us and other friends, and then we had a fun night. Dated for a bit after that as well. Story 32. Before my ex and I started dating, she slept over at my house a few times. She liked to sleep in just one of my jackets. No banging was involved at the time, just watching movies and falling asleep. She said she felt comfortable around me. Anyway, we woke up the next morning on this occasion. She gets out of bed and stretches, and the bottom of my jacket comes right below her cakes. I tell her, "Hey, be careful. The jacket came up, you might be showing something." She responds by looking at me, rolling her eyes, unzipping the jacket, letting it fall off, doing a spin, looking at me again, and then walking to my bathroom to brush her teeth. When she came out, she wanted me to help her lotion up. The banging began very soon after this incident. Story 33. I was teaching martial arts at the time, and I was about 20. One woman came in to sign up her kids, and I was instantly fighting a stiffy. Easy 8 out of 10. She was a school teacher herself, but she was signing up her kids, not herself. Ah, well. Fast forward a couple of months, and she was coming by the school in her free time. After classes were done for the day for open mat, she did yoga, and the big open space was perfect for her to practice her poses. One evening, she did a headstand that started with her legs straight up, then transitioned into a split. All 3 males in the room, myself included, exchanged a look. That was attractive as hell. We all ended up talking at the school until nearly midnight, and there was a definite vibe between us. Emails and phone numbers were exchanged, and the conversation began. We had a lot in common, not the least of which was finding each other attractive. I also found out she was divorced. Win. We made plans for one weekend when her dad had the kids. There was a bottle of wine, some music, and I decided there was no time like the present. I went in for a kiss. It was reciprocated. We had a little discussion about how we wanted to handle things and keep it on the down low, and suddenly we were in the bedroom. All told, it was a great few months getting laid every other weekend. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.